Hello everybody, my name is Sebastian Perusset. As EUREKA said, I've been working with Francesco Bullo and Anaita in the Department of Mechanical Engineering on self-assembly of 3-arm junctions in DNA strands. So the big picture is, what is self-assembling systems? They are systems that sort of manufacture into desired structure via the autonomous behavior of each of their parts. So sort of anything that sort of automatically combines to form a desired structure. Many biological processes and chemical reactions form in that manner. Some of the future applications looking into self-assembly are mainly robotics. You can, if you're able to design miniature robots that can self-assemble to do many goals rather than just one robot that can only form one function, that would be very beneficial. Many say that if done correctly, you can simulate biological processes, which is what I mainly try to do. Also aerospace, you can sort of, rather than creating a giant satellite and sending that into orbit, you can have many smaller satellites sort of assemble into your desired structure once they're up in space. It'll be a lot more efficient to do so that way. So my summer project goals were to create a simulation of this self-assembly reaction. This is the 3-arm junctions and DNA strands that, when mixed with the right catalyst, these monomers form using self-assembly. Once I have the correct simulation, I will then compute the time complexities and reaction graphs. These are just sort of standard graphs that you'd get. And also analyze the effects of varying the catalyst. So one of the key features of my simulation would have to be being able to change the catalyst. And 2 ways that I represented the catalyst is 1 using a collision probability factor, and 2 actually simulating with real catalytic particles. This diagram sort of shows what's going on. Basically, there's 3 monomers, and with the use of a catalyst to form this 3-arm DNA junction. So sort of the first way I try to go about doing self-assembly is using a program called Simulink. At this point, I was actually trying to do a different goal, but this gets the picture across why this would not be the correct program to use. Basically, there's no collision detection, and so particles just go right through each other. Let me get the mouse here. So particles just go right through each other, and there's nothing you can do about it. We actually contacted some of the people that are more advanced with this, and they said that's one of the flaws about this program. Also, besides that, the coding is very redundant. Instead of actually writing code, you have to make a flowchart. This is the flowchart I made for that simulation that you saw. Each of these is a particle, and then each one of those particles requires a numerous amount of other boxes, which each one has numerous amounts of functions in them. And you can't have the same function, because or else it doesn't let you run it. To make things simple, if you try to add 1,000 triangles, this will exponentially grow into a huge flowchart that is very unnecessary. So we decided to switch over to MATLAB. The key advantages for running simulations on MATLAB is a lot faster and more flexible. Less redundancy is the main thing. You can use for loops to run functions over and over again without having to actually create a zillion new functions. You also have easy access to outputs. Just by deleting a semicolon, you could get any data that you want. So we use that. Also, the only disadvantage is that it's hard to create moving bodies of your desired shape. You can't make nice triangles and 3D plots, sort of how you can make plots but not moving plots, sort of how I did with Simulink. But here is how here's how my first simulation works. Basically, particles will collide. These represent monomers. And then once they collide, the catalyst-dependent algorithm runs, and that determines whether they bounce away or bind to form this unstable dimer right here. once they're in that unstable dimer form, any collision with the monomer will result in the formation of a 3-arm junction. And scientists can use this model to simulate their catalyst. They can just change the conditional algorithm to tune it to how they like it. This is a simulation using the probability factor. As you see there in the legend, you can see each one of the different molecules. And it's going to restart. It's important to notice that not all collisions between the green monomers result in the dimer. It's kind of hard to see because the ones that you notice the most are the ones where they turn blue. But by tuning that, you can simulate this process more accurately. Also, another thing to mention is that in reality, there is a lot more monomers within a confined space. They're not as open like this. I just did this simply for the visual purposes, so you can see what's going on better. And there's also many more. Right here, there's only, I think, 50. This is the model that I used with actual catalyst. I used actual circles to represent catalysts or initiators. Basically, the monomers will not bind to each other unless first bound to this initiator. So here, these two will bounce off each other until it is first bound with this catalyst. Then once it's in that state, it's sort of in this activated state right here, and the catalyst sort of shuts down from any outside influences. And then it's free to bind to form this dimer. And then after that, catalyst is released, and the dimer is free to form the 3-arm junctions. This is just another way of representing the formation. Here you can see there's at least one of each particle in the legend. Right here, these molecules have already bounded a monomer and a catalyst. These red ones are the catalysts, and all the green ones are the monomers. Here's the other simulation. Sort of try to follow a catalyst. It's probably the best way to look at this. So we found that this method more accurately represents what's actually going on in the experimental reaction. It's also more realistic because the more catalyst that you add, it also creates more noise and more unnecessary collisions, whereas in the other model it doesn't. One of the important measurements that we got from our model is the time complexity. This is very important. It's very important that it doesn't increase exponentially throughout time. So you don't want to increase a certain amount of particles and then have it take many hours more. We found that it stayed within a reasonable amount of time of completion. So that's very beneficial. There's no correlation. We noticed there's a pattern in 3Ds, but that's a really slight pattern, very loosely said. The main conclusions that we get from our graph are this reaction graphs. So we have similar characteristics in our graphs from the experimental reaction graphs. This was done by another lab with the actual monomers throughout time. I don't know if you can see this, but this is in hours. So basically, the actual experiment would take hours, and it says emissions right here. That's because they used fluorescence to light up every time these 3-arm junctions were completed. And theirs is a lot more smoother because they have 10 to the 5th amount of emissions, while I could only put like 1,000 monomers. But in other words, my simulation is very customizable and can be tuned to however the scientist feels is necessary. And it got some pretty close data and close results. And we'll be trying to, in the future, simulate maybe more complex self-assemblies, such as this DNA strand seen here. Another thing is make it more user-friendly, so you don't actually have to go into the code and change numbers, parameters yourself. Sort of a pop-up box can appear upon running the program. Also, create self-assembly software for robots, which can be beneficial for many reasons. You can have little robots that move around and assemble to sort of any form that you want. And yeah, I would like to thank Anaita, my mentor, Francesco Bullo, EUREKA and OFI, and EUREKA, CNSI, and UCSB for giving me this opportunity. Any questions? OFI.
You said you did this in MATLAB, right?
Yes.
But you said it's not good with moving particles. How did you pass that?
So I went past that by updating the position of every particles in every frame, which essentially makes them move. But you can't really designate a velocity to them. You can make them change position more drastically, but it's just updating their position every frame.
Did you do it every single frame?
Yes. So basically there's a for loop that says 4, 1, 2. You could insert how many amount of frames you want it to last. And then within that, you have its position equals, and then you update it every for loop that gets updated. Yes.
So is your model taking into account, or is there any concern with the angle at which these particles hit each other? So for example, you're forming a Y. Does it matter that they have to hit at a certain angle in order to form that Y versus bouncing off? So does the does the angle of a collision have any impact?
No, it does not, but you can tune it to have like a probability. So if you calculate the probability of it being that angle, you can input that into your program. Yeah, but I can't. Yes?
Kind of an extension of that, if you considered how your model or your data would change if you factored in the third dimension to the reaction, and then also the different diffusion constants that your different products would have.
I can answer the third dimension one, no. Basically mine was in 2 dimensions, and also the diffusion, I didn't really take that into account either. Yeah, I didn't look much at the chemical properties as much as the mechanical one. Yeah. And this.
What do you mean by the time complexity? You showed a graph about time complexity. What's time complexity measuring exactly?
Time complexity measures the time it takes for a program or a process to complete by changing the amount of inputs. So, and in my case, it was the number of particles. So what we noticed is that if you change the number of particles from anywhere from 5 to 30, if you just change the number of particles, it was mostly dependent on probability rather than our program. So what you don't want to see is a huge spike in your program. You would add inputs. You don't want it to just all of a sudden start taking hours, because then it would defeat the purpose.
And it was using a constant number of frames?
Yes.
Okay.
Maybe one last question? Okay, 2.
Okay. Here.
Did you try using 100 or 1,000 particles?
Yes, actually in my simulation, I use, sort of this is for demonstration. This has 50 particles and then 5 catalysts. My simulation, I would use 1,000 particles and a little bit bigger area and more catalysts. But
how did that affect your time complexity then?
yeah, but what we noticed, it was mostly dependent on probability rather than the actual program itself. So we decided that it wasn't really appropriate to show.
Can you go back to the slide that shows the DNA monomers and how they kind of assemble to form the Y shape? Was in the very beginning.
Yes.
Yeah, where they
Yes.
Okay, so does your model have any way of accounting for the fact that in order for that structure to form, you have to unravel the DNA?
Oh yeah, there's actually, I simplified this diagram. Basically, this.
Because like in a cell, you'd have other proteins that transport it, you have other proteins that unravel it, you have proteins
Yeah.
that
So,
connect together to
I had a
put these two
different figure
pieces
before,
together.
but I changed it. So this one, when it binds the catalyst actually unravels it. And then
Okay.
once it's unraveled, this one sort of comes in and takes the place of the catalyst.
Okay.
And then it's left in an unstable form, which then the third one goes to it. But yeah, the initiator actually is the one that unravels this first one.
Oh, okay. Would there be a way to maybe attach the initiator to the monomer in the first place to increase the efficiency of them coming together, so that you don't have to depend on that collision as well? In reality, maybe not
In reality,
if you were setting
probably,
these
yeah.
to space.
I'm not really too sure though.
Maybe that bond may not be very strong.
Yeah, it's the catalyst and monomer is not stable, as well as the dimer is also very unstable. The monomers are metastable, so that means if you leave them and like for a long time with each other, they will start to form after a few hours. But this is the only one that's truly stable form.
And then, one quick question. When you have the collisions, you said that sometimes they pull apart, and sometimes they'll actually attach to one another. So is that just based on like a calculated probability, or were there some
Yes.
parameters to that?
Yes.
So you just put in a number of this is how many times? it's
Yeah,
plugged in.
exactly. And you can tune that to however many simulates it actually costs.
Okay, thank you.